Does globalization have a future? With European Commissioner Mairead McGuinness, we are looking at global economics in time of crisis. Thank you for being with us today. In this world of many crises happening at the same time, what is the greatest challenge to global economic stability?
Well, I think I've lived long enough to know that there have been crises all the time. I think right now it feels like we're taking a hit from all sides. So this horrible war in Ukraine, we have inflation, we have high interest rates, we come out of COVID, supply chain disruption, and we had Brexit as well. Sometimes we forget that. I think the biggest challenge to us has always been unity, but I think we're strengthened because of what we have actually gone through. And then for me, the next big challenge is to do what we say we're going to do around climate change and environmental topics, while also developing our own industrial strategy, looking at critical raw materials. In a sense, I think the last few years have forced us in Europe to be less naive, to realise that our strength comes from within. And while we work with global partners, we actually do have to strengthen ourselves. So for me, it's a stronger financial system. For others, it's in other areas of policy. But I think we're capable of that. And we should really take some, I think, hope from the fact that despite a pandemic, which really could have pulled us apart, despite this horrible war, we've had strong unity. And I make the observation that perhaps Brexit was a very seminal moment for Europe, because we could have fallen apart. We might have seen other countries say, well, is this strong enough? Will we stay in? But in fact, it had the opposite effect. It really forced us to renew our vows. And I think our vows have been renewed.
Yeah, and in your area of work, where can you intervene? Where can you make something happen to actually foster economic development?
It's kind of simple, because money is at the heart of absolutely everything. So I always say that the financial system is sort of looked at as something separate from the world and from normality, but it's the backbone of our economy and society. So what I can do at the very level of the citizen is to make sure that they are not intimidated by the financial system, that they engage with it as informed and confident consumers of credit, and they get the best deals. At the higher level, of course, it's around the stability of the financial system. We learned the hard way. We had a horrible financial crisis. It impacted member states, and families are still suffering. I think from that lesson, we realized that what we did afterwards in terms of regulation and supervision has worked. It's been really important for financial stability. Right now, we know that the US are having some issues with regional banks. Truth, in Europe, we actually monitor and regulate and supervise that size of bank much tighter than in the US. Now, it's not to say that Europe will never have a problem again, but it's to say that we have learned the hard way, and we will not reduce our focus on financial stability. But there are challenges. So we have crypto, which is not new, but it's there, and we need to regulate that, and we're doing that. We also have digitalization, wonderful digitalization. But what does it mean for the financial system, for our traditional banks? I'm sure you, if I asked you, have different apps to do different things with the system. So it's actually a very exciting area, the whole financial area, because of change and evolution. But it's also, we need to be then very much monitoring where would the risks be in this new era, which also includes higher inflation and interest rates that are increasing. So I think Europe, for all its flaws and its imperfections and always a struggle to get there, has shown remarkable strength and capacity to do the right thing. Because I think we've discovered that if you pull apart, then we will fail citizens.
You actually made the comparison with the situation in the US, and the EU has things in order. What if we look at other parts of the world, for example, China or emerging economies in Africa and Latin America? How does the EU situation compare in a global setting?
Well, I think everyone learned lessons from the financial crisis, and clearly there were global regulations that we've implemented perhaps more diligently and in more detail. I think the big thing where the connections are with the global financial system is around digitalization and capital flows. So we talk in Europe about open strategic autonomy, and I think for me that means that I have to be mindful that the financial system is strong enough and open enough so that we can have trade, because you need money to trade, with partners. but also that we have in place sufficient guardrails to protect against sudden shocks. And I think the world is probably going to face its biggest shock, which is around climate change and biodiversity loss. It's becoming very real. I was talking in the car as I drove here, and people were saying about the drought that happened here during the winter, and mentioned climate change. So climate change is now part of the ordinary conversation. What we really need to do now is move from words to action. So again, part of my portfolio on finance is how do we get money, private money, flowing towards the transition to a more sustainable society and economy. And you do that by looking at information. So what companies are doing what? How do they report? And how do I, as an investor, make an informed choice? If I don't want to invest in something that has no future because it's brown, let's say, and I want to move to something that is higher on the spectrum of green, then I need information. So we are and have laws around corporate disclosures. The financial system is also preparing for shocks should they not adjust their portfolios towards a more sustainable agenda. And the ECB are involved in this as well. I think it's an extraordinary but very important moment where everything to do with a society and economy that's more sustainable will be driven by money. So money sometimes can be the root of all evil, but it can also be the absolute trigger to make change happen. And I really would like European citizens to understand that they have a part to play in it, where their pensions are invested, what companies they follow, and for all the challenges it imposes on us, including on regulation and supervision. We really don't have a choice. I mean, this road is going in one direction. If we don't complete the road, we're going to fall off the end of it. And I mean, maybe it's too big to take on board how awful climate change would be, not just for Europe, but perhaps more so for those parts of the world that have less capacity to deal with it.
Yeah, no, and very good also that you bring citizens into the conversation. Of course, money plays a central role in everyone's life. It's that's of course clear.
Yeah, but money plays rather a central role, especially if you have very little of it. And I'm really very much motivated by making sure that those who need access to finance, who have little, can do that and are not charged exorbitant rates, because money matters to everybody, and I'm sure you share that view. It's vital.
Yeah, no, and in fact, if, for example, there is a bank crash, like recently we have had difficulties both in Europe, in Switzerland, and in the US, people rightly get alarmed because their savings might be at risk. But of course, with such a complex topic, with financial matters, there's also a lot of misconceptions about the true impact of certain developments. What are the kind of misconceptions about financial stability that you come across in your work? What is important to address?
I think there's one thing that strikes me, and maybe misconception is not fully, but let's talk it through. I sometimes think that people believe once something is regulated, that's the end of it, that regulation is done and everything will be fine. The truth is that in a digital era, regulation that's fit for today will have to be adjusted for tomorrow, and tomorrow comes very quickly. And also supervision needs to move with digitalization. What's very interesting in the US experience, so in the past, if there was a bank run, you saw people outside a bank looking for their money back and in long queue. Nobody saw anything this time because social media had actually distributed the fear that something was going to happen in SVB, and then people went online and moved their money. So again, for those of us who regulate and supervise, we need to not do a knee-jerk reaction to this. We need to be very measured and see, is everything we have in place fit for that? Are we confident that we are giving the reassurance to our depositors that they are safe? And in Europe, they are. Up to 100,000 is guaranteed. We're trying to complete banking union and build capital markets. So that means we will constantly be working on the structure of our financial system. But, it's in my title, financial stability, and it's a heavy title when you see what's going on globally. But those who came before me did extraordinary work. I was in the Parliament at the time and I was part of that. But we have to stay vigilant. So I suppose I often hear people say, but where were the regulators during the financial crisis? And the truth is we had regulation, but it was pretty light touch. Now we have much more rigorous regulation, and we have also supervision that is effective. But I am never complacent, and I would never take any comfort from saying, well, there's a problem in the US and it's not in Europe. For me, it's actually to check what happened in the US and be very clear that everything we have will avoid that happens in Europe.
Excellent. Commissioner McGuinness, thanks for sharing some of these detailed insights with us on the economy, global financial stability, and what is happening at that level, at the EU level in that area. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you very much. Enjoyed the chat.
It was a pleasure.